start again. It's a rage thing.
So in this video, we are going to learn rest of the data types in Python. So first one is range data type. To define it, we need to use range function, which will return a range of value. Now let me define it first. To define it, we need to give a name. So here I am giving it p, and then you need to use range function. And within parentheses, you need to pass the range. Here I am passing 10. I will discuss about these parameters in a great detail, but for now, let me just pass 10. And now if I print the type of p, then it will be showing range type, like this type of p. So it is showing range type. Now the question is, what does it mean by range of 10? Actually, you can think of it as a collection of numbers from 0 to 9. Now let me print this p. So it is showing 0 to 10. But here 10 is excluded. It will take up to 0 to 9. And the default step value is 1. That's why it includes all the numbers from 0 to 9. The actual syntax of this range function is like this, where we need to write start value first, and then we need to write end value plus 1, and then we need to define the step value. Now here the step value is optional. If you don't write it, then it will automatically take the default value, that is 1. This range data type is basically used with for loop. We will again come back to this range data type when we will be dealing with for loop. So our next data type is byte data type. Here also we don't have any direct way to define a byte data type. To declare a byte data type, we need to first define a collection data type like list or an integer. But it is quite different from other data type. Let me explain it clearly. So we have a list and we want to convert it into byte data type. So we need to first give a name. So here I am giving it as b, and then we need to use the bytes function. And within parentheses we need to pass the list, that is L. Now if I print the type of b, then it will be showing bytes, like print type of b. So it is showing bytes data type. Now let me print this b. So print b. So here this b represent it is a bytes data type, and this /x is a escape character, which means these next two digits are in hexadecimal form. Here I have written down some hexadecimal form of a decimal value, like hexadecimal form of 1 is 1, and hexadecimal form of 2 is 2, and the hexadecimal form of 11 is b. So here it is showing the hexadecimal values of these elements in list, like 01 is the hexadecimal form of 1, or this is 2, and so on. Now one more thing is we can store only up to 255, which means if you store any value which is greater than 255, then it will not going to be converted into bytes data type. For example, here we have a list that is t, and within this list, let me store some values that are greater than 255, like 260, 300, 400. And now if I try to convert it into a bytes data type, then it will raise an error, like let me define a name that is r and then bytes, and within parentheses let me pass t, and now if I press enter, it will raise an error like this. Next is, if we pass an integer value within bytes function, then it will create a list of that size and fill it with zeros. So here we have an integer value that is equals to 6, and now let me define this bytes function and bytes, and within parentheses if I pass this integer value that is a. Now if I print it, so this is nothing but the bytes object of list. You can also verify it by converting it into list. We will see this conversion in a great detail in our next video, but for now let me convert it into list, like p equals to list of, and within parentheses if I pass this bytes object that is b, and now let me print it. So it is showing a list of length 6 and all the elements are 0. Finally, if you try to pass a string value, then you need to pass two more things within this parenthesis. First of all, we need to pass the string. So here we have a string a equals to this. So here I am passing a, and then we need to pass the encoding scheme in which we want to encode the string. So I want to encode it into ASCII. So here I am passing ASCII, and then finally we need to pass the error, which will handle the conversion when it will fail. Typically, we have three error handling scheme. First one is strict, which means if it doesn't find the encoding of any character in the particular encoding scheme, then it will raise an error and the conversion will stop. For example, here we have this character like this, and in ASCII we don't have the encoding of this character. So here if I pass strict like this, then it will raise an error like this. Second one is replace. You can replace with question mark whose encoding is not present in that particular encoding scheme. For example, here the encoding of this character is not present in this ASCII encoding scheme. So here if I write replace, now let me run it, and now if I print B, so note that this character is replaced with question mark. Finally, we have ignore, which means it will ignore that particular character. So we don't have the encoding of this character. Now if I write ignore in error handling part, then it will simply ignore this character. So let me print the B. So note that it has ignored this character. The next point is indexing and slicing concept is applicable on this data type. For example, here we have a bytes object like this, and if you want to access this element, like if you want to access this 2, then you need to write B, and within square bracket you need to pass the index of this 2. So the index of this 2 will be 0 and 1. So here we need to pass 1, and now if I press enter, now note that it is showing 2. So the next point is it is immutable, which means you can't change any value after declaration. For example, here at index 0 we have this value 1. Now if you try to change it by indexing concept, then you will get an error like B of 0, and now if I try to change it from 1 to 10, then we will get error like this. Bytes object doesn't support item assignment. So our last data type is Bytearray. It is nothing but the mutable version of this bytes data type. We have seen that bytes data type is immutable, so it is nothing but the mutable version of this data type. So we can change the value of this data type after declaration. For example, here we have a list like this, and now if I declare the byte array like B equals to byte array, and then within parentheses we need to pass this L, and let me print it. And now if I try to change the value of this element from 2 to 5, then we can do it happily. Like B of within square bracket we need to pass the index of 2, that is 1, and then we need to write the new value, that is 5. And note that it hasn't raised any error.